Welcome to Resume Basics presented by The Workplace. In this session, we will be covering the functional resume. Functional resumes focus on your skills and experience rather than your chronological work history. It's the second most common format for resumes and is most often used by people who either have gaps in their employment, are just starting their careers and don't have a lot of work history, or who are changing careers. However, it does have its limitations. Some employers and HR professionals still have an unfavorable opinion of this format and may think you're trying to hide something by using this versus a chronological resume. It's also not always easy for applicant tracking software to read depending upon how you format the resume. So why use this format? If you do have gaps in your employment, not a lot of work history, or are changing careers, this format lets you really focus on your skills and what you can bring to the employer. If you have a solid work history with few or no gaps in employment and can target your resume to each position you're applying for, I would recommend using a chronological resume instead. Let's start with some resume tips before we get into the meat of the resume itself. First and foremost, keep it simple. If your resume is hard to read, it's not going to get read. Use clear headings that make it easy to skim your resume. Don't use graphics or pictures, and don't use a small font just so you can keep your resume to one page. If you have enough pertinent work history to fill at least 1/3 of a second page, then you have enough to warrant a 2-page resume. I prefer and recommend a summary instead of an objective. Objectives tend to tell the employer what you want out of the job, where a summary is designed to tell the employer what you can bring to the table if they hire you. Make sure you're highlighting the key skills in the job description in your resume. This is a must not only for the applicant tracking software, but also when an employer skims your resume to see what pile it's going to go into. If they can't find the skills they're looking for when they skim your resume, they may very well move on to the next prospect. Use bullet points instead of full sentences when you're listing your duties, and start each bullet with a strong action verb. Don't use I, me, or my when you're listing your duties. If you can add figures, percentages, or numbers, definitely do it. Employers love to see how much you increase sales, instead of just increasing sales. It's okay to list volunteer work, internships, or other non-paid positions if they directly relate to the position and you list it as volunteer, intern, etc. For this, where you would normally put a job title, you can use or include volunteer or intern. So let's say that you volunteered in the front office of a humane society, and now you're applying for a front office job at a veterinarian's office. Your job title at the Humane Society could be volunteer front office staff or volunteer receptionist. Before we go any further, let's quickly talk about targeting your resume. One size definitely does not fit all, and you should really target your resume to every position you're applying for. By targeting your resume, you can make sure to include those important keywords from the job description, which can greatly increase your chance of getting that interview. For more information on targeting a resume and the master resume, check out our video, What is a Resume and Why Do I Need One? Okay, let's dig into the headings or sections of the resume. The 5 main headings for this format are contact information, summary, skills and job duties, work history, and education and training. I'll give you a minute to look over the sample before we move into each section. Let's start with your contact information. This one is pretty straightforward, and it's going to include your full name, address, phone number, email address, a LinkedIn profile if you have one, or website if you have one. Your name should always stand out by being slightly larger than the rest of your font and in bold. Whether you left align or center your contact information is totally your preference. When you get to your address, it's no longer necessary to give your full mailing address. Just the city, state, and zip code will do. A good working phone number and email address are a must. Both your voicemail and email need to be professional sounding, as this is how employers are going to contact you. If you haven't set up a voicemail on your phone, now is definitely the time to do it. Same with an email. If you either don't have one or you're still using the one you created in high school, it's time to create a new professionally sounding one that you can use for your job search. Just remember not to include your birth year, as this can give an employer information they really don't need and that could actually hinder your job search. If you have a completed Work Search Ready LinkedIn profile, it's not a bad idea to include it here. The same goes with a website. Next up is the summary section, since it's first under your contact information. This is by far the hardest part of the resume to write, and I actually recommend writing it last. If you do decide to tackle it now and you get stuck, then definitely write it last. I personally find it much easier to write the summary once I've finished the rest of a resume. One of the reasons it's so hard to write is because there is no one format to follow. There are literally dozens of formats you can choose from. Okay, first and foremost, do you use an objective or a summary? I am a big proponent of a summary instead of an objective. As I said earlier in this video, an objective tends to tell an employer what you want from them, whereas a summary lets an employer know what value you can bring to them if they hire you. Here are 3 samples to look at. Go ahead and pause for a few seconds to look them over. Let's start with A. This is a straight-up objective. As you can see, it focuses on what the resume writer wants from the company and tells nothing about what they can bring to the employer. B is still an objective, but it tells the company a little bit about the person applying. And C is a summary. This gives the employer a snapshot of what the job applicant can bring to the company. C would be my choice, but B is not a bad option either, especially if you're stuck on how to write that summary. The skills and job duties section is going to take up the majority of the space on your resume and can be titled Relevant Skills, Professional Skills, Areas of Expertise, or about 100 other titles. Regardless of what you call this section, you will want to organize your skills by category. Samples of categories could be leadership, sales, customer service, etc. The goal here is to list your relevant skills as compared to the job description. So if that job description really focuses on customer service, that should definitely be one of your categories. You should include technical or hard skills here, but also a few soft skills that apply to the job. And anywhere you can use numbers, figures, or percentages, do that too. Employers like quantifiable data. Increased sales by 35% will draw an employer's eye a lot faster than increased sales. Just don't overinflate or make up numbers, as this could bite you in the long run. Here are a few skill samples to look at. Go ahead and hit pause so you can look them over, and then we'll dive into the work history section. This section can be titled Professional Experience, Work History, Employment History, or about a dozen other names, but they all mean the same thing. In the functional format, this section is going to be minimized, but still needs to follow the basic resume format of including the last 10 years of your employment. Start with your current or most recent job and work backwards about 10 years. If you have jobs that are relevant to the position that are older than 10 years, this is one format where it's okay to include them. Just don't list any positions over 10 years ago if they aren't relevant to the job you're applying for. The formatting here is much simpler than on the chronological resume and just includes the company name, city and state, and the dates of employment. For the dates, using month and year is preferred to using just the years, and you absolutely do not need to include the actual day of the month. This just takes up valuable space and can actually make your resume look outdated. Okay, education and training is next. Let's talk about what to include and what not, and then we'll discuss where it should go on the resume. First, you're going to want to start with your most recent degree if you have more than one. If you have an associate's degree or higher, you don't need to list your high school information, unless the job description specifically asks for it. If you have a high school diploma or equivalent, but no college degree, you might be tempted to skip the education section. I don't recommend this. Go ahead and list your high school or equivalency. For high school, it shows that you completed, And for the equivalency, it shows that you made the commitment to go back and finish it. When listing your education, most people are going to include the degree type, name and city of the school, and the year you completed your education. There are times when you will need to expand on this section, but for most positions, this is all you really need. If the date you received the degree could lead to possible age discrimination, it's okay to leave it off. List additional trainings you've received only if they pertain to the job you're applying for. For instance, if you completed a grant writing course and your new position might require you to write grants, you would definitely include it. But if you took that grant writing course and you're applying for a position as a welder, it would make no sense to include it. If you have a lot of pertinent trainings that came before and after your degree, you may want to consider having a separate heading just for your trainings. If you received your equivalency diploma in New York State, but you don't have all of the information on it, go to the website listed here and you can pull up that data. For other states, check that state's Department of Education website. Here is a sample of what the education section might look like on your resume. Now the question is where to put it. If you are still in school, have recently graduated, or are changing careers where your education is the qualifying factor, it should go at the top of your resume right under the summary. If you've been working in the field for any length of time, or if you have a solid work history and are changing careers but not due to a new degree, then you would place it after the professional experience or work history section. Let's talk about your references. While references are not technically a part of the resume, you will need these for interviews and for some job applications. Your references should be a separate page from your resume, but you should use the same header to keep everything looking consistent and connected. Please don't send your references when you're applying for a job unless the posting specifically requests them. There's no need to share your references' contact information with dozens of people. However, when you go for that interview, then definitely bring your references with you. And I'd bring more than one copy, as you never know how many people you might be interviewing with. Since I brought that up, always bring extra resumes as well. Your reference page should include 3 to 4 professional associates and should list their name, job title, company name, city and state, phone number, and email address. You should always contact anyone you want to use as a reference ahead of time and know what they will say about you. There's nothing worse than giving someone as a reference and then have them speak poorly of you to a potential employer. For your professional references, it's recommended to use the following people: former managers or supervisors, current or former coworkers, an advisor or a teacher you work closely with. You may be able to use someone who worked or works under you or a client or customer if you have a strong professional relationship with them and you know what they will say to a potential employer. Just be careful with both of these categories, as some people might see them as inappropriate. You should not use a current manager or supervisor unless they know you're looking and are completely supportive of this move. You also should not use anyone that can't really speak to your work ethic, anyone who's ever fired you, or immediate family. A personal reference is fine if the employer specifically asks for that. Otherwise, steer clear of personal references too. So what if you're either new to the workforce or it's been a long time since you've worked? Who do you use then? A group leader or acquaintance from your past that can speak to your work ethic is your best bet. This could include a youth or church group leader, a volunteer organization that you worked with, or the next door neighbor that you've helped around the house or mowed for. If you're really struggling, you could use a family member if you actually worked with or for that family member and it's not your parent or sibling. Using a family member should always be a last resort though, as an employer will not consider them an objective reference. This is what your reference page could look like. Feel free to pause it here and take a better look, and then we'll finish up. Now that we've gone through what a resume is, why you need one, and the 2 main formats, you're ready to start writing. Here's a list of sites that can be of great help in writing that resume. Also, make sure you check out our resume packet on our website and stay tuned for more videos from us on resumes, interviewing, and more. Now that we've covered what a functional resume is, it's time for you to get started. Here's a list of items you'll want to have on hand to make writing that resume easier. Once you've finished the first draft of your resume, remember to have someone else look it over. Proofreading is crucial to having a good resume, and by the time you're done writing, you won't be able to proofread it yourself. Want us to look it over? Send it to the email address listed here, and we'll critique and make recommendations on how to make it even better.